Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode number 5 of Walk Off Whiskey here on the Till Mets Do Us Part family of channels, if you will. 2 weeks away from this show, but we are back in full effect, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. John Sapanaro with you from North Hollywood, California, where I'm told at least it is a bit warmer, it is a bit sunnier, it is a bit nicer than it is back east. I know it's cold. I know that you guys are going to get hit with probably a snowstorm over the weekend. So what better way to spend your Friday having a drink, hanging out with me, talking Mets baseball. I appreciate everybody who is joining me right here, right now. I did say that we were on hiatus from this show for the last 2 weeks, and it was partially by design. Look, 2 weeks ago, I just got to Friday and just decided that I didn't want to talk about the hypotheticals anymore. I didn't want to talk about, well, what if the Mets did A? What if the Mets did B? What if the Mets did 1, 2, 3? What if the Mets did this? We all like in the offseason to play GM. We like to mock trades. We like to mock signings. We like to speculate. It's when this channel and for a lot of content creators and in the baseball space, it's when our show is the busiest. So it's not to put that down, but I think you guys could all agree that we were kind of at the fatigue level 2 weeks ago. And then, of course, last week, things popped off in a big way. And so we had to preempt this show with a full-sized version of Till Mets Do Us Part with myself and with Ibby, because we felt that it was the most appropriate thing that we could do was to talk to you guys. It was too much going on. So what a difference a week makes from just being fatigued and just being just exhausted by the concept of talking about hypotheticals to all of a sudden it's like, boom, Bo Bichette. We can talk a little bit about Luis Robert, and then or that actually not even yet was just Bo Bichette. And then Luis Robert this past week. And of course, Luis Garcia to a lesser degree on Wednesday as well. And then the big news drops. Freddy Peralta, the Mets are able to execute that trade, and that'll be the big topic of conversation here today. We're going to see if Ibby can join us. I know this is Walk Off Whiskey. This is the solo show, but if Ibby can join us, he will pop on and give his thoughts. He was very sure, damn near certain that the Mets would get Freddy Peralta, so shout out to him. So we have a lot to get into, and of course, all of your comments to try to have this driven and led by you guys. As always, do a quick roll call. We got Brad in the house. Shark Vader Studios, which is, of course, Cindy. We got Darren Rivera. We have Truman Quinn. Who else is here? Armand is amazing. KP, Clink, Jeff Cohen in the house. Did I say Darren Rivera? Well, Darren Rivera is here if I didn't. We have Stanley here asking, where's Ibby? And then we have Armand doing a great job saying, John does a solo show on this particular day. So thank you. We have Non-Genarian here as well. Lots of folks, 65 and climbing. And so we'll get into the conversation, but I will raise a glass, or in this case, a mug, because I made a little bit of an error. My dishwasher is running and all of my appropriate whiskey rocks glasses are in the dishwasher. Couldn't stop it in the middle. So I figured I'd go to the next most appropriate thing. If you were a Parks and Rec fan, a Ron Swanson mug, I think is the next best thing to have a sip of whiskey out of. So now we can officially begin the show. Look, we have to talk about, before we speak about Freddy Peralta specifically, Brad says it here. Why can't this small market guy, meaning Stearns, do something? LOL. Yeah, this is the David Stearns revenge tour week, guys. I would sit here and say that I don't take any pleasure in saying I told you so, but I would be lying because I take a lot of pleasure in telling the folks who were adamant that the Mets weren't going to do anything, and the Mets weren't going to try, and the Mets weren't going to put a competitive team on the field, and the Mets were going to rebuild, and the Mets were going to win 70 games. Look, the plan now is in full focus, and it may work. I think it will. I think it's a good plan. It may not work. And that's baseball, Susan, right? Like, now we're getting to the point where we can see what the roster looks like. We can see the vision. And again, any year, any given roster, any given team, you might win, you might lose, you might do something in between, you might make the playoffs, you might win the World Series, who knows? But this notion that the Mets weren't ever going to do anything and they didn't have a plan and David Stearns was a fool and he was tearing it down and there was not going to be anything to follow. Sorry, guys. If you thought that, you were wrong. And there's no other way to address that. There's no other way to look at it. There's no other way to try to sugarcoat it. There isn't. I was dealing with a lot of people online moving the goalposts and saying things like, well, we'll see what happens. I judge wins and losses. Funny that you say that now. Why weren't you saying that in November? Why didn't you say that in December? Why didn't you say that during the winter meetings when you just decided you yourself that David Stearns was a fool and the Mets were incompetent and he was a small market GM and he didn't know what he was doing and Steve Cohen only cared about the casino? And you see where I'm going with this. So now that people like me who never lost faith, who saw the plan or knew that there was a plan, even when we couldn't fully see what it was, now that those people are proven right, the goalpost moving is, well, let's see if it works. Of course, let's see if it works. Of course. But you know what? They could have brought back Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo and Jeff McNeil and Edwin Diaz. They could have brought back the exact same team and went out and traded for Freddy Peralta, let's say. And then we could just see if that works too. So let's see if it works is such a piss poor thought process to have. It's such a bad faith argument to have because, like I said before, sometimes teams win, sometimes teams lose, sometimes rosters are good, sometimes rosters are bad. But that's not the argument any of us were making. The argument was there was a plan. The argument was the thought process was going to be there. The argument was come spring training, we were going to have a team that we could back. We were right. And everybody else who thought the opposite, they were wrong. And so I do, as I take a sip, I relish in the fact that I was right. And it is nice to kind of hit you with a little bit of I told you so. And maybe that's being a poor sport. Maybe that's being a sore winner. I don't really care. I don't. Joshua likes graham crackers saying, I think Peralta is a great ad, but getting Myers too is so good. He'll be great depth, great out of the pen if we need. Don't sleep on Myers, talking about Tobias Myers. Look, Freddy Peralta is the jewel of this deal. Freddy Peralta is the perfect fit. He was the perfect fit on November 1st, November 15th, December 1st, Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's, Boxing Day, all the days up until now. He was the perfect fit. He was the perfect player for the Mets to add, especially once they turned around and not only gave Bo Bichette the big deal, which is taxed at 110%, and not only absorbed Luis Roberts' money, which is taxed at 110%, but he was the perfect fit no matter what. But the fact that he's only making $8 million meant that you could do all these other splashy things, even with Cohen's seemingly unlimited money, his unlimited budget. You could make all these other moves, and then you could bring in a guy who has ace upside. He is probably a top 15 starting pitcher in Major League Baseball. He's no worse than top 20. He's a guy who pitches a lot of innings. He's a guy who's a bulldog. He's a guy who's a leader. He's everything you want. He's the perfect fit. And like I said, he became even more the perfect fit once you consider where else the Mets spent money, where their payroll already was, and the taxes therein. So, but with that, it was going to cost you a lot to get him. And other teams, because he's only making $8 million a year, any team that's trying to be competitive and any team looking for pitching, doesn't really matter if you're the Mets or the Tampa Bay Rays. The Tampa Bay Rays maybe aren't looking for pitching, but you see where I'm coming from with this. Any team could have afforded him. You didn't have to be an ultra super rich team. You didn't have to be the Mets or the Dodgers or the Yankees or, take your pick of team that spends a lot of money, Toronto Blue Jays, whatever. You didn't have to be those teams. Anybody could have gotten this guy, which is why the Brewers were always going to trade him. even though they kind of balked at the idea, maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago. And they kind of played it cool, like, nah, we don't have to trade him. But they didn't have to, because even they could afford him. But they were going to trade him because this is how the Brewers operate. They traded Corbin Burns off of a Cy Young. Now, it's a little different because he was making a lot of money in arbitration and all that stuff. But they were always going to trade him because his market was always going to be red hot. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because the Mets gave up a lot, relatively speaking. Now, I would do the deal that they did. Ibby and I talked about it on Wednesday. And when we talked about this perceived deal and the deal that was brought up by Michael Marino, we said that we would maybe not do that deal exactly as constructed, which was Sproat and Jet Williams for Freddy Peralta, simply because, one, he's a rental, and two, once you trade Acuna, you're trading from this same type of player if you also trade Jet Williams. And that's true. 100% true. Even though Jet Williams has the higher ceiling and is the bigger prospect and all of that stuff, you're trading the same type of player. So it becomes a harder thing to rationalize after you've made the other deal, which is why I brought up this comment from Joshua, which is getting Tobias Myers in this deal was very important. And shout out to Michael Marino, whose reporting was right, who said the Brewers asked for Jonah Tong. Mets said no. They probably moved on to Sproat and Jet Williams after that. Mets still said no. And it seems as though the Mets were trying to get another viable, usable, important piece in the deal that's not just a throw-in. And I know people are going to look at this and say, that Myers is the throw-in. And compared to Peralta, maybe, but he's not a throw-in caliber guy. First of all, this is a guy who has 5 years of control. That is major. He's a guy who gives you a weird look because he throws like fully over the top, and it's just not a release point that a lot of major league hitters see. He's a guy who, like Joshua points out, can be a weapon in the bullpen as a multi-inning guy. You think about what Trevor Williams brought to the Mets for 2 years after coming over from Chicago in the Baez trade. Something like that, maybe even better than that. Swingman, long reliever, give you 2-3 innings in the middle of a game. Again, but the 5 years of control, he's a guy who could be in your rotation in a couple of years, regardless of what happens with Peralta. He's also a guy who started a playoff game against the Mets. So this is a guy who is not just a throw-in. I think this guy is not as important, but the 5 years of control and a lot of the stuff that comes with it is really a great look for him. So astute observation. Carson, shout out Mets Weekly, saying Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat weren't drafted by Stearns, not to mention both are lower regarded in the Mets system positionally. I do think that's true. I think that's, I think that not drafted by Stearns is a factor. It's not the factor, but I do think the emergence of other players started to change the narrative. I was listening to the Mets pod with Joe and Connor, and I see Joe is here in the comments. I'll pull up Joe's comment here in a second because it's an important one. But I was listening to the Mets pod, and they made a lot of great points about this, and I agree wholeheartedly. You have the emergence of Nolan McLean. You have he still needs seasoning, but what you think Tong can be. The Mets love Christian Scott. Jack Wenninger's on the come up, on the fast track. All of a sudden, you can trade Brandon Sproat. It doesn't mean they don't like Brandon Sproat. It just means you can move on from Brandon Sproat in a deal like this to get you a proven commodity right here, right now that you want, that you feel you need. And the same is true of Jet Williams. Mets really like Jet Williams. I wouldn't say I was down on Jet Williams. I'm 50-50 on Jet Williams. I just didn't think he was a natural fit positionally for the Mets, like 26-man roster, especially once they got Marcus Semien, who I know is old, but you've got Lindor, you've got Semien now for 3 years. I don't know if Jet is really a center fielder. He's athletic to do it, but I don't know that I want him out there. And you're already, trying to have Benj be in the outfit. Like, there's just a lot of moving parts. And when you look at the emergence of AJ Ewing, I think this is when you started to see, okay, the Mets can stomach a Jet Williams deal, because like me and Ibby have talked about on this show, and we both admitted it, and Ibby loved Jet Williams as a prospect. He said even he would rather trade Jet Williams than AJ Ewing because, like I mentioned before with Luis Angel Acuna, similar profile players, but we both, Ibby and I, felt that Jet deserved to be on the infield, on the dirt. And he wasn't going to really get that opportunity here. Whereas AJ Ewing, he might be the second best defensive center fielder in the organization right now. The first best, truest defensive center fielder in the minor leagues is probably Nick Morabito. Somebody who really knows prospects a little bit better can correct me on that, but I feel like that's where things are right now. But AJ Ewing is a great athlete who projects to be maybe the best overall center fielder the Mets have. And if he continues on this trajectory, maybe he will be the best defensive center fielder in their system. And to me, when you look at the Mets outfield options and seemingly the lack thereof, a guy who's a natural at that position and a natural body and athlete for that position, to me, is a better thought process than, keeping Jet Williams and, hoping that he can be your center fielder. We got Joe DeMayo here. Shout out Joe DeMayo, like I said, saying Mets loved both these prospects. It's not like they wanted to dump them, but the system just is simply at the spot where they can afford to do it, and Peralta is the guy that Stearns is comfortable with. Also, I say this all the time, not all the prospects are going to pan out. We know that 80% or somewhere around that of prospects don't pan out, but it's not just that. You can't keep them all. Joe has talked about this. I believe Ernest Dove has talked about this. A lot of people on Mets Twitter who are more connected to the prospects than I am have said this, where not only is the Mets 26-man roster, on the crowded side with some of these positional overlap, but so is the 40, so is the AAA roster. You have to start to make moves. You guys, I teased it a little bit, but he is here.
Oh, hey.
We got Matt Ibby Ibanez in the house, my partner, my co-host. Matt, I'm going to change the look. I'm going to change the look of the show. I'm bringing up.
You don't have to do that. I'm not trying to steal your thunder here.
We transitioned near seamlessly from Walk Off Whiskey to Till Mets Do Us Part. People were asking about you. People said, "Where's Ibby?" Ibby and
I will say this. I will say this real quick. I don't have much time, but I did.
That's okay.
I did want to pop in for a moment just to just hit on a couple of things, and then I got to bounce out. But I wanted, obviously a lot of stuff happened since our last episode, so I want to just say a couple of words before.
Absolutely, I'll give you the floor on it really quick. Joe said, does this mean John is not drinking anymore? No, it does not. Still got the drink. We're still good. For Ibby and the people who came in late, it is whiskey, but I didn't have any rocks glasses. They're all in the dishwasher and it's running. So I went with the Ron Swanson mug, which I thought was an appropriate way to drink whiskey. Anyway, Ibby and I thought about preempting this show with Till Mets Do His Part, but like he just mentioned, his schedule didn't fit. He was going to try to get on and talk about Freddy Peralta. Ibby, I know you missed the very beginning of the show, but kudos to you, man. You never really missed a beat on this, where you said, even as recent as Wednesday, right before it happened, that you were confident that Freddy Peralta was going to be pitching for the Mets on opening day. And now, barring something unforeseen, Freddy Peralta will be pitching for the Mets on opening day. Kudos to you for getting it right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it just, like I said, it always made sense. I didn't want to waver off of that because I thought that both teams matched up. The prior relationship with Stearns and Matt Arnold, and what the Mets had, what the Brewers might be asking for. Like I said it when everyone was complaining about the whole Garrett Crochet thing. I said the Mets farm system now is at a point where they can go out there and get that pitcher. And everyone assumed that that pitcher in this market, in comparison to when Crochet was available, is Skubal. But I said, your guy's more likely Peralta. Makes more sense. You can actually get him, and the Brewers will be more willing to move him, where I think the Tigers are in a tough spot. And like you said, unless we see something unforeseen, Peralta will be starting opening day for our New York Mets.
I mean, look, when you look at this, Ibby, it was they matched up so well. I said Peralta was the perfect fit for them to go get on November 1st, on November 15th, on Thanksgiving, on December 1st, on Christmas Day, on New Year's, during Hanukkah, on Boxing Day. It didn't matter. He was the perfect fit for this team. because of the money he was making. I know that the Mets have so much money, but once they go out and they get Bichette and they get Robert and they add him to the payroll that they've already had, and these guys are getting taxed at 110%, and that turns Bichette into an 80-something million dollar player, and it turns Robert into a 40-something million dollar player. To get this guy on $8 million, to get this guy that gives you not only the innings and the reliability, but he also gives you a guy who could start game 1 or game 2 of a playoff series. I also think he might be a guy, if you look at some of the numbers and how he's trended in his career, he might be getting better as he learns to pitch more. He might, he's excellent now, but he might be coming into his own as being a true bona fide ace. Depending on who you talk to, Peralta's a top 15, maybe top 20 pitcher in Major League Baseball. He can maybe be better than that this year. I think that's what you're looking at. And the familiarity with David Stearns, of course. There's just so many reasons why Peralta to the Mets made sense. And again, shout out to Joe and Connor, because I just listened to their show last night. But the Mets also had the pieces. Like Brandon Sproat feels like a Brewers guy. Jet Williams feels like a Brewers guy. Like it just all made so much sense. And now we can be, you and I, and this is how I open the show, you and I and the people like us, we could be vindicated that there was always a plan. And that
nonsense, John. There was never a plan. The goalposts have been moved. You know, it's all BS. And I saw a comment before, Carson, I am not trying to steal your beanie look. I just dressed like this because I thought I looked like someone that might actually give John a whiskey. I figured I would dress that way, or like sell you an awful IPA. But no, I just think that it made too much sense. And like you said before, before you introed me, like when you have pieces on the back end like Santucci and Weniger and Will Watson and Zach Thornton, like you have these pieces, it's like it does make players expendable. Now, I know people are often screaming about, you gave up 6 years of control on both players for a 1-year rental, and then Stearns comes out and he says, well, it's he's here. You make these deals because you assume it's going to be a 1-year deal. It's the price to play. Like all the right things to say. I still think that there is an avenue where this could be the guy they do extend. What those numbers are, like I said on Wednesday, he has every right to push for a Dylan Cease type of contract. I can't blame him if he wants that because I think he's better than Dylan Cease. But he's open to an extension, so we can see if that ever comes to fruition. I don't expect it to happen today or tomorrow or anytime soon, but it is something that could happen. But they might wait to see how he acclimates to New York. They might see how he meshes with everyone and then go from there. But in general, and I'll say my piece here before I have to bounce out of here. I just think that a player like this makes all the sense in the world. I think from all the videos that are coming out now on social media and the personality that he has, what he was to the Brewer clubhouse, preaching camaraderie, having people come to his place. Like it just feels like he's going to fit in seamlessly here. And we all know that the talks about, what had gone on with this clubhouse throughout last year, washing themselves of a lot of what that clubhouse was. And Stern said it himself in his presser. They weren't going to run things back. There's a lot of different in this clubhouse now in comparison to what there was when the season ended. So bringing in a guy like this, putting him at the top of your rotation, stabilizing factor, when you have him and what you hope Noah McLean can be moving forward in his first full year, you have two guys. I'll say one, but hopefully two guys that can act as stoppers within a rotation, which is something that the team lacked severely last year, because when there was bleeding, there was no one that was actually able to step up and throw 6 innings. Or again, and that's on the low end, like throwing 6 innings, because a guy would go out there last year and throw 3 innings, and then the next guy the next night would throw 1 inning or an inning and a third. It's like it's crushing the bullpen. So having someone like this makes this team better. I want to say that people like us and others like us are vindicated, John, but we know that's never going to be the case because everyone's screaming still.
It is to me.
I have people screaming. I have people screaming in the smallest of things that I mention, like when I just continuously post the picture of David Stearns looking like a chef. That people don't like it, and it makes them angry, and they feel like he didn't cook anything, and this isn't a plan. This was just it's coincidence if he fell into it. This wasn't the actual plan. This was plan B, C, D, E, F, like just anything and everything to not give credit. It's not Stearns, it's Cohen. Cohen did this. He got Bichette. He got on the phone and traded for Freddy Peralta, who Steve Cohen drafted from .72 at the age of 19. Like all those, like it's just stupidity. It really is. And I'm happy that the plan, if you will, that was always there, came into the limelight. It shows that this team, in my opinion, and I'm not sure if you hit on this, but in my opinion, at least, this team has gotten better. It's gotten faster. It's more athletic. And most of all, it's more well-balanced. Even if people want to look at the WAR and say, oh, there's only a difference of like 0.4 when it comes to the WAR. Why couldn't you just bring back Pete and Nimmo and keep McNeil and re-sign Diaz? Like all this stuff. It's like, it wasn't working. And if there was a rift or whatever, it wasn't working. Now you repurpose things, and your thoughts on the team of 25, they can still be applied here for 26 because the talent overall still equates to that in terms of WAR, at least. So you should think that you are a playoff team. And now you have better pitching to go on top of it. So all in all, great week for the Mets. Loved every minute of it. Loved the fact that we were able to have, 2-3 nights in a row of just nonstop action of refreshing our phones and being happy in the end. But that's really all I wanted to put out there. I'll save the rest for Wednesday. I don't want to keep sucking up the air over here for your show. But thank you for letting me just hop on. I just want to say those couple of things. And Freddy Peralta, New York Met. It's awesome. I love it.
It'd be a couple things before you go really quickly.
I just saw Joe's comment.
Joe did say earlier that you got a R-Truth return level pop when you came on the show.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Then said, "Tell me you love me, Ibby," which I think was the thing you laughed about. But also, he was really summed up your tongue-in-cheek comment earlier as well when he said there was not a plan. Steve Cohen forced Stern to do things. Ignore the part where they have met Bo Bichette for months and almost got Robert at the deadline and have tried to get Peralta all winter. If you ignore everything you've seen and everything you've heard and all the facts, well, then, yeah, you can think whatever you want, which a lot of people we know, Ibby, in Mets fandom do, and a lot of people on Twitter certainly do. So I will let you get out of here. Yeah. And go be with your kids. Yeah. I will turn the show back into Walk Off Whiskey. But cheers to you. And,
cheers to you. Cheers to everyone in the chat. Enjoy the rest of the show. I'll try to stick to the comments from now on. But I will say one final thing as my sign off. Ken Rosenthal, I'm sorry. You stink. That's it. I'll see you guys.
Ibby trying to throw people in the safe, even on the times when it's not the moment to throw people in the safe. It's not the show to put people in the safe, but it is all good. Love. Oh, I brought up Ibby back by accident. There we go. Trying to change the show back into the appropriate branding. Shout out to Ibby for finding the time to jump on the show, turning Walk Off Whiskey into Till Mets Do Us Part, even if just for a moment. Get back into some of the comments here. And there's a lot of good ones. There's a lot of really good ones. Appreciate Carson for bringing this up, saying, I'll tag you in a post I made yesterday. You could afford to use these bullets, talking about Jet and Sproat, if need be. Followed it up by saying Crochet was available when Boston had a more appealing capital and didn't have like 6 players in their top 10 nursing injuries from the last season, tanking their value like we did. It's a great point. Part of the reason why you build up this prospect capital is so that you can supplement your major league team. And you're supplementing your major league team either the way Carson Benj is going to be a part of the Mets roster, or the way Freddy Peralta is now going to be a part of the Mets roster, due to, in basically entirety, I was going to say in large part, but entirely to the fact that Sproat and Jet Williams had value to other teams and other places. I do want to bring up the rest of what Carson said. He did send it to me on Twitter, but I'm not going to pull it up here on the screen, but it's the Mets prospects via pipeline with an OPS over 725 or an ERA under 350 in the year 2025. There's a lot of ranked prospects, top 100 people. There are some unranked that are lower down, but they all fit this criteria. And there is a massive group of people: Nolan McLean, Carson Bench, Jonah Tong, Jacob Reimer, AJ Ewing, Ryan Clifford, Elian Pena, Will Watson, Jack Wenninger, Jonathan Santucci, Chris Suero, Nick Morabito, Dylan Ross, Ryan Lambert, Zach Thornton, Giovanni Rodriguez, RJ Gordon, and two guys I've not heard of, Douglas Orellana and Edward Lantigua. So that's the comprehensive list of Mets prospects that either had an OPS over 725 if they're a hitter, or an ERA under 350 if they're a pitcher in 2025. And so you just see how stacked they are throughout their minor league system. Their lower levels are good. Their upper levels are good. They are where they need to be. And they are where they need to be not only now, but in the future. They have the pieces that they can go out and get something they need at the deadline. They have the pieces that they can be opportunistic if somebody else, I don't want to say falls into their lap, but yeah, if somebody else becomes available that you don't expect to be available. There are so many avenues, and they're going to have people. Look, a lot of people are we don't know if Polanco can play first base. Okay, I think Polanco can play first base. I think he'll be fine. But let's just say you're right. Let's just say he can't play first base. And Vientos isn't good. And Beatty can't do it either. Well, Ryan Clifford is going to be knocking on the door, more than likely. So if it's not Polanco, maybe it's Vientos. If it's not Vientos, maybe it's Beatty. If it's not Beatty, maybe it's Clifford. You see where I'm going with this? The depth is there across the board. And it's like that at other positions too. And look, we're talking about Freddy Peralta and rightfully so, but I love the fact that they went out and got Luis Robert. Look, Luis Robert is a flawed player. Luis Robert might not ever duplicate the MVP-ish season he had in 2023, but he doesn't really have to. Because if Luis Robert, and a lot of people said this, it's been on Twitter, I retweeted it. If Luis Robert just has the year he had last year, which wasn't really good. The second half was good. The first half was more of what we've seen where he hasn't been great. If he just does that, no improvements at all, the Mets center field production is going to be leaps and strides better than it was last year. The Mets got almost zero production out of their center fielders last year. So when you look at even what he did that wasn't great, if he just does that, they'll be better off for it. This rhetoric that Luis Robert is basically just Tyrone Taylor is so off base. Tyrone Taylor is a very good extra outfielder. He's a guy who, when he was with Milwaukee, had a reputation of hitting left-handed pitching. He has regressed offensively every year that he has been with the Mets. He is a defensive stud, that's true. But every year his offense has gotten worse, and every year his ability to hit lefties has gotten worse to the point where it almost disappeared last year. Luis Robert, even as this version of him where he's bad, he's always mashed lefties. He's continued to mash lefties. And you're not really going to give up much defensively. He is an elite center fielder. Top 5, I don't know, top 6, top 7, definitely top 10. I would say probably top 5 off the top of my head without listing through everyone defensively. He's right there. And if he ever gets back to some level of what he gave you in 2023, which the under the hood numbers would tell you is possible, the athleticism and the age and just the pure talent would tell you is possible. And maybe the change of scenery affects it. Maybe just in the nebulous way that guys who are on bad teams join good teams and all of a sudden they get a bit better. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe the Mets coaching staff is just better than the Chicago White Sox coaching staff. And maybe that's part of it. Maybe there's an intangible way and a tangible way. So, I think when you look at it, I said this to Ibby on Wednesday, and I stand by this. Not to take anything away from Truman Pauly, who I don't know much about, but I know, has one of those fastballs with a tremendous amount of induced vertical break. And the Mets paid him a lot of money over slot when they drafted him this past year. But I don't know a lot about him, and he might not be anything, and who knows. But with all due respect to him, Luis Angel Acuna will never, and I can say this with confidence, I don't think he will ever get to the level 50% of what Luis Robert did in 2023. Isn't that fair? Luis Angel Acuna will never be 50% of what Luis Robert was in his best season 2 years ago. I think it's not crazy that Luis Robert can be 50% of what he was in 2023, and then it's automatically worth it. So, the moves that they've made have been so savvy. Luis Robert is the best defensive center fielder this team has had since Juan Lagares. That is true. Darren Metz got 2 home runs last year. Robert hit 13, 14 home runs last year and is now in a better lineup. Yeah, I mean, look, if you told me that he was going to hit 20, like if you told me Luis Robert went 20-20, I would believe you. If you told me he went 20-30, I would believe you. 20 home runs, 30 steals, I would believe you. And that's going to be from your center fielder? Carson saying Robert has to be the 7th best hitter on this team. 40 stolen base speed, 10 outs above average defense in center field, 0 pressure, kid. You're out of baseball hell. That's the other thing about this when we talk about change of scenery. Luis Robert, fairly, unfairly, he put up the numbers. He signed the extension, right? But like Luis Robert, probably with that team in Chicago, they wanted him. They needed him to be the 2023 version of Luis Robert. The Mets don't need that. He doesn't need to be the guy carrying this team, carrying this offense. Ibby always talked about it with Pete Alonso. It wasn't until the Mets got Juan Soto. No coincidence that Pete Alonso had the best year of his career since his rookie year. It wasn't until they got Soto that they allowed Pete to just be Pete. And you saw all the numbers tick up. Before Soto got here, the knock on Alonso from Mets fans, the same Mets fans who can't believe he's gone, by the way, now, when I was defending him and people were telling me how bad he was that, oh, he didn't hit for average and he didn't drive in enough runs because he's always swinging for the fences and blah, 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 blah. Well, once Soto got here and Alonso didn't have to be the second best hitter or even, pre-Lindor, the best hitter on the team, all of a sudden he was able to just be Pete. Now, Pete was still the 3rd best hitter on this team, and in some ways, the 2nd best hitter, right? 2nd best power hitter, 2nd best RBI guy, that kind of thing. I mean, by the numbers, was the best RBI guy. He had more RBIs than Soto, but you know what I'm saying. He was the 2nd best hitter in some metrics to Soto, no worse than the 3rd best hitter to Soto and Lindor. To Carson's point here, look at Robert. Soto's your best hitter. Now, 2nd best hitter is either Bichette or Lindor, the other guy's 3rd, right? 2 and 2A, whatever. Polanco is going to be asked to be a better hitter. I think you could make the case for Simeon, even in his decline, offensively as a 35-year-old. You just kind of know what you're going to get from him. There's going to be an expectation of professionalism there where he's going to be expected to be a better hitter. I think the Mets are going to look for more out of certainly Brett Beatty. And now all of a sudden you're getting to Luis Robert. Yeah, 6th, 7th best hitter on this team. And if he's ever better than that, and I keep referencing it because it's fresh in my head. And again, shout out to Joe and Connor because they do a great job. But Joe DeMaio said it last night or on yesterday's Mets pod, and I wholeheartedly agree. If Luis Robert is the Luis Robert of 2023, which we don't think is going to happen, but if he were, the Mets are going to have the best offense in baseball. Can you imagine that guy hitting 35, 38 home runs, playing that kind of center field? Man, it'd be absolutely electric. So these are the kinds of things that you look for. Chrissy stopping by here to remind you to drink the whiskey. Thank you, Chrissy. Appreciate that. I was kind of going off on a rant. It's important to get the drink in. Otherwise, the show never ends. The show never ends if I don't drink the whiskey. Carson saying it's more funny about the stuff with Acuna playing bored. Now he's going to the most disheartening and depressing team to play for. Not my problem anymore. Oh, well. I will say this, Carson. I think this is good for Luis Angel Acuna because I think Luis Angel Acuna's ceiling is a bench piece, a defensive replacement, a pinch runner. But that's an important part on a lot of baseball teams. I really do believe in that. However, he's 23. To be entrenched in that role already at 23, when you have the baseball pedigree that he has and the lineage and the family that he has, it's got to be a little disheartening. Now he can go to the Chicago White Sox. He's going to play every day. Their infield is crowded. Maybe he's an outfielder. Maybe he's just a better defensive player than somebody at second or short, and he supplants somebody, whatever. He's going to play. He's going to get the chance to play every day somewhere. And you know what? They added Sir Anthony Dominguez. They added Murakami. Look, I'm not saying that the White Sox are going to be good. They're not. I think they're going to be better. I think they're going to be out of the doldrums that they had been in over the last couple of years. So good for him. Good for him, for sure. There's a couple starred comments I had from earlier. From Joshua Likes Graham Crappers. John, do you think any of Vientos, Ronnie, or Beatty are traded? Short answer is no, but never say never. I'll take them one at a time in reverse order. At this point, I don't see a world where Beatty is traded. I don't think the Mets are going to get the value for Beatty that they would want. And I think Beatty fully has a role on this team, especially now that all of Jeff McNeil, Luis Angel Acuna, and Jet Williams are no longer in the Mets organization. I think Beatty, and you guys know I don't like Beatty, but I'm just keeping it 100. I don't think Beatty's a starter in the major leagues. I really don't believe it. I give him a ton of credit because prior to the second half of last year, he wasn't even a major league player. And I think it's clear now, and I said as much, he is a major leaguer. He is a major league contributor. I'm not sold on him being a starter. But Beatty has a role in a couple ways. One, you don't know what's going to happen with Bichette. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion he opts out because it's a massive contract. I think there's a chance the Mets could extend Bichette or at least whatever. It's not about Bichette. Bottom line is Beatty has a role on this team next year as a safeguard. If Bichette opts out and the Mets don't retain him, Beatty can slide back in and be your third baseman. This year, with McNeil and Acuna and Jet Williams all out of the organization, Beatty can play third. Beatty showed you he can play second. If he learned to play second the way that he did, and he wasn't great, but he was certainly adequate at it, if he learned to play second, he can definitely learn to play first. I believe that wholeheartedly. There's a group of people, Ryan Finkelstein, Locked on Mets, is one of them, saying that Beatty might be actually your best defensive first baseman, better than Polanco, better than Vientos, certainly. There's a world where that's true. I don't know. That's a bridge too far for me right now. But given what he's done defensively at third, it's not ridiculous to think that he could be a plus first baseman. So now you're talking about a guy who can play third, play second, add first base to the repertoire. He played 30 some odd games in the minor leagues in left field. So now he can give you some innings probably in the outfield. He's athletic enough to do all these things. So I don't think Beatty's going anywhere. Plus you still have the fluidity of the DH. So you can move him around. I think Beatty will get plenty of burn. Mauricio, I don't think is going to get traded for similar reasons with Acuna and Jet and to a lesser extent McNeil not being here. I think Mauricio goes to AAA. They maintained his option. They picked his option over Acuna's option. Shows you what they think, David Stearns in the front office, about the difference in those two players. So they chose his option. I think they're going to use his option. He's not played baseball consistently in a long time. I think he goes down to AAA and he plays, I don't know, whatever. Shortstop, third base, second base. He's going to play somewhere every day and he's going to hit. Could he be traded at the deadline? Sure. But I don't think there is value in trading him now. Again, never say never. I don't think Vientos is going to get dealt either. However, I do think of these three players, Vientos is the most likely to get dealt. Simply because, unlike the other two, Vientos becomes a little bit more redundant with every move that they make. There was this talk about, well, Vientos is your right-handed power bat earlier in the offseason once Alonso left. And that's true. And I do think Vientos, if he plays a lot, if he's your everyday DH or near every day, he's probably going to hit 30 home runs right there, somewhere in that, 25, 28, 30, whatever. He's got that power. He has that ability. And I do think there's bounce back for him. But because he doesn't have a position, because he's not good enough at any of them, and also now there are going to be guys ahead of him on the depth chart, right? Like we know he was already not going to see any more third base, but you have Bichette here, who now also is a right-handed hitter. He's not going to give you the pop of Alonso, and he might not even give you the home run power of Vientos, but he's a right-handed hitter that hits in the middle of your lineup. So now all of a sudden, Vientos' role diminishes a little bit. Then the Mets go and get Luis Robert. Now again, Luis Robert might be a guy who just hits lefties, and maybe he's the same guy he's been the last 2 years, and that's not great, and you'd love to have Vientos too. But if he bounces back even a little bit, if he bounces back even at all, he's another right-handed hitter with power. Neither one of those guys is a 1-for-1 to force Vientos out the door, but both of those guys make Vientos a little bit more expendable when you factor in that Vientos is not likely to have a position. He's not going to play third. Bichette's playing third. On any given day where Bichette doesn't play third, Beatty's going to play third. He's not going to play first, Vientos, more than likely. I know there's some talk that he will. I just don't see it, because this is where I do agree with Ryan Finkelstein. I think that Polanco and Beatty, if they give him the first baseman's glove, will both be better first basemen than Vientos. That's based on what they've done in their careers. That's based on their athletic ability. And that's based on, albeit the very small sample size that Vientos showed last year. But man, Vientos looked horrendous at first base. He did. His footwork was bad. He didn't look comfortable around the bag. Could you work on that? Absolutely. Is Kai Correa the infield defense whisperer? 100%. If we believe in him to get, Polanco up to speed at first and Bichette up to speed at third, could he do that with Vientos too? Of course he can. But with all due respect to Mark Vientos, Polanco and Bichette are better athletes than him. And I think they have better aptitude for defense, even if they were bad at their initial position, which was shortstop for both of them. So of the three, that's the long answer. The short answer is I don't think any of them are traded, but if I had to pick one, Vientos is the guy. Fringe photo. John, is there any chance getting Harrison Bader to fill the outfield? I don't think so. Not anymore. They got Luis Robert. That's the move that they went for. I would have entertained Harrison Bader had they not gotten Luis Robert. I think he would have made the most sense because he would have given you a true center fielder that you could plug in there every day. Now, whether or not he puts up the numbers that he did last year in a career year, that's different. But I think Bader is not taking a short-term deal to come back to the Mets to not play center field every day to be the fourth outfielder, to platoon with Carson Benj. Bader did enough last year to, again, a career year, and I wouldn't be the team. I wouldn't want to be the team to pay him and reward him big time off a career year. But he did enough in that career year to deserve to get, more money than he's gotten, a multi-year deal. He deserves it. And at the very least, he deserves a 1-year deal for a decent amount of money where he could play center field for somebody. So I don't think Bader's a fit anymore as soon as they got Luis Robert. I do think the Mets would be smart to get one more bench piece. And I just said all the stuff that I said about Vientos and how the Mets basically don't need a right-handed hitter because they added Bichette and they added Robert. However, I think that the piece the Mets should add is a right-handed hitter who can who can play left field. I think that is the thing. A lot of you are going to say, what about Tyrone Taylor? I guess, but I mean a right-handed hitter. Sorry, no disrespect to Tyrone Taylor, but I think they need a hitter, a guy who can hit lefties legitimately. Because right now, Carson Benj is going to be your left fielder more than likely. Maybe Beatty sees some time in left field. Both guys hit left-handed. Both guys are largely unproven. Benj, not at all at the major league level. Beatty, to say up and down would be an understatement. So I think the fit here is Austin Hayes, guy like that. Miguel Andujar. Did Andujar sign anywhere? Yeah, Henry sharing a brain saying Austin Hayes. The Mets did add Vidal Brunal. They did. That's a good point. Maybe it's him at least to start the season. Maybe that's the guy. But yeah, that's. I think the ship has sailed on Harrison Bader. I don't think that's going to be a thing. And for him, it doesn't make sense. As we take a sip, Darren Rivera. I think Robert will hit 20 to 25 home runs, steal 30 to 40 bags if he stays healthy, hit 230 to 250 with a 780 to 800 OPS. It's a steal. Darren, those are really good numbers. Obviously, especially but I don't think those numbers are out of the range of possibility. Now, maybe just to hedge a little bit, maybe he doesn't do all of that. You know what I'm saying? Maybe he gives you 20 home runs, not 25, right? Like what I said before. Maybe he goes 20 and 30, 20 home runs, 30 steals. So low end on both of those. And maybe the low end is 230, but then he gives you, an 800 OPS. Like there's a world where he does there's a world where it's 25 home runs and steals 25 bases. There's a world, far-fetched as it may be, where he goes 30-30. Like, you know what I mean? Like, all of those things are possible, and I think your numbers are very fair. I do. I think they're good. I think those are fair projections. I really do. Carson, Jake Brown on X just now, hearing that the Mets are still looking to sign a pitcher and talking with teams about spare parts and potential contracts they would be down to shed. Interesting. Interesting indeed. Carson and I both know Jake Brown. Jake Brown does a great job with his Mets show and has been a guest on this show for a couple times. Worked with him at the Queens Baseball Convention, worked with him when he was still on the New York Post podcast and all that stuff. Jake is not a reporter, and Jake will be the first person to tell you that, but Jake does have some people in the industry that are connected. I don't want to say sources or whatever the hell. I'm not putting words, but Jake is like a lot of us. He's been wrong, but he's been right. So I do think that's the kind of trade you would see. I do think that's the kind of trade where you would say, hey, I'm going to get a starting pitcher and maybe we shed David Peterson. Or I'm going to trade Vientos, to go back to that last conversation. We're going to trade Vientos. We're going to get another reliever. I do not think, Brad, you're getting Devers from the Giants. Giants are not trading Devers. Giants are not eating money. None of that's happening. I saw stuff for Skubal. I know their Tigers are asking for the world. There's no chance. There's no chance Devers is getting traded. I would say there's almost no chance at this point Skubal gets traded. I don't think any team is going to meet the demand that Detroit has for him. And they can ask for whatever they want. So I agree with Joe here. The Mets don't need to take on any more contracts. But Joe, I guess the question to you, Joe, is would they? You know what I mean? I agree with you. I don't think they need to. Everything's going to get taxed at 110%. I said it earlier. Luis Roberts now a $40+ million player, and Bichette is an $80+ million player. When you look at the tax considerations and all of that stuff, but maybe they would. Maybe there's a world where, they trade, they take on money, but they get out from Peterson's money, which I know is not a ton, or they take on money and they get out of Senga's money, which is a little bit more, but also not a ton. Maybe there's a move that makes sense for both sides. I don't know. But I do agree with the larger sentiment that they are they don't need to take on any more contracts, saying, I mean, I thought payroll would be similar to previous years, and it's currently the highest in Cohen's ownership. So shrug. I'm happy you brought that up. And again, shout out to you and Connor for talking about it on your show. But Cohen has just blown through payroll year over year, right? He says one thing and then he's like, man, I don't know, Carlos Correa, I could sign him for $300 million. I know that one didn't work out. But point being, when there's an opportunity, he's going to go get a guy. When Steven Matz spurned the Mets, he went scorched earth. And it says a lot about Cohen, but this is shout out to you, Joe and Connor. It says a lot about Stearns, which I think is unfair that people are like, he's a small market GM. Stearns a small market GM? Does this look like a small market GM to you? With a nearly $400 million payroll? Highest payroll Cohen has ever had? Tax-wise and straight up? Doesn't seem like a small market GM to me. Small market GM? Absorb a $20 million contract on a guy who might be really good in Luis Robert? Doesn't seem small market to me. Doesn't seem small market to give somebody $42 million on a one-year contract and offer another player who I know they didn't get in Kyle Tucker $60 million a year. Doesn't seem like a small market guy. I know this is ancient history and you guys don't want to talk about it now, but doesn't seem small market to give Juan Soto more than $750 million. So, yeah, thank you. Odd. Shout out you, by the way, Odd. Small market these nuts. I mean, they're out of there. They're small market nothing, man. Thank you, Carson, for the payroll and the tax right now. Carson, I trust your number on this, your sourcing, but can you just tell me where you got it from? The payroll and the tax, $500 million. That's insane. Over $500 million. That's ridiculous. Cindy Shark Vader saying, John, come on, you know Stearns is locked away in a room somewhere. This was all Cohen. I love the tongue in cheek from the folks who were just on board the whole time. Whether that's me and Ibby, whether that's Cindy, whether it's Carson, whether it's Joe, whoever it is, I love it. I love the tongue in cheek. Truman Quinn. Truman, I appreciate you. I love the I know Truman differed from me and Ibby a lot over the course of this offseason, legitimately, but then there was also a lot of sarcasm and some fun jokes along the way. But this is a good one. We dodged a bullet with Correa, DeGrom, and maybe Pete. I mean, look, the Correa thing is a good thing we didn't get him. I think, DeGrom just didn't want to be here, but it would have been cool for vibes for DeGrom to stay. But clearly, like, in terms of, he signs with another team and then gets hurt near immediately, like Mets dodged a bullet there. They were right to not want to pay him the big deal. And maybe Pete, although I do think Pete can be productive for 5 more years. I do like Pete Alonso's projections over 5 years. I said that I would have given him the deal. I understand why the Mets didn't. And I think the Mets are a more complete team heading into 2026 than they were in 2025. But, maybe he falls off. I don't know. It's possible. Armand, that $517 million feeds the pockets of the Pirates, the Marlins, and the other cheap fucking owners. Yeah. Yeah. Joshua likes graham crackers. I'm seeing a lot of people start to calm down and realize signing Pete to 5 years might not have been the best idea. Sometimes you have to move on. I like this one from MAZBX. If Alvarez and Robert Jr. perform and play close to 120 games, the NL is in trouble. I'd like a little bit more for Alvarez specifically. I don't want to ask too much of Luis Robert because I think he's only played over 110 games once in his career. I know Alvarez is a catcher. The reason why I say I want a little more is I would just like there to be a full healthy season for Alvarez. He just deserves it, man. The guy has had more freak, fluke injuries, broken hands, chipped bones, hit by pitches, fouling off. he just deserves to be healthy all year. And as a catcher, healthy all year probably means he plays in 130-ish games, right? Because you got to give catchers the time off. So, but I do agree with the larger point. Mets Ledger over on Twitter. Shout out Mets Ledger, new follow of mine. I think we follow each other. What's the status of Jared Young, another lefty, but was excellent last year in Syracuse, hit 4 home runs in 43 at-bats with the Mets. Beatty getting hot blocked him, excuse me. He's a pretty good bat. I think, honestly, Ledger, with the way the Mets are currently constituted, Jared Young's already on the 40-man. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion, but if they don't add a player like an Austin Hayes that I mentioned before, I think the last bench spot is going to go to Jared Young, or certainly it's his to lose. When you look at some of the people he's going to be competing against, I don't think Mauricio is an option. I think Mauricio is going to go to AAA and play. I don't think the Mets see any value in having Mauricio be the last guy on your bench. Not for them, not for him, not for his trade value. So I think Mauricio maybe is the starting shortstop, maybe. Who knows? In AAA, maybe he's playing third, whatever. It's where he plays is less important. They just need him to hit and play every day. Point is, Christian Pache and Bay and some of these other guys, like I think Jared Young has the inside track. He's a good bat. His under the hood numbers, his baseball savant page, really good at Syracuse. Small sample size. He didn't really hit with the Mets. He did hit those 4 home runs, but I think as it stands right now, there's a chance that Jared Young is the last guy, the 26th guy on the roster, which I wouldn't be mad about. Maybe he stays, maybe he sticks, maybe he doesn't. Who knows? Gonna get down to our last sip here of whiskey. You know what that means. The show's got to end soon. We'll end on this question. Darren Rivera. John, do you agree with Steve Phillips saying the Mets are the 3rd best team in their division? No. I think Steve Phillips is an idiot. Now, again, baseball seasons play out how they play out. I didn't think the Mets, I thought the Mets would be very good this past year. I certainly didn't think they would miss the playoffs in a virtual tiebreaker to the Reds. You know what I'm saying? So there's that. But I tweeted something, Darren, and maybe this is too harsh for some folks, but I don't really care. Steve Phillips and Jim Duquette, and I know Jim Duquette contributes for SNY and he whatever. I don't really care what 2 failed GMs of the Mets think about what the Mets are doing. I don't care. You can't pay me to care about what these guys are doing. Steve Phillips had a bit of an up and down tenure. He did make the trade for Piazza. He did keep Piazza, despite the fact the Wilpons didn't really want to, as like the last thing, Doubleday kind of forced them to keep Piazza. But listen, and maybe this is more the Wilpons than Phillips or whatever, but there were misses all over the mark, man. Like, Phillips tried to get Vladimir Guerrero Sr., couldn't do it. The Mets tried to get A-Rod when Phillips is the GM, couldn't do it. I know certain guys didn't waive their no trade clauses, but the Phillips tried to trade for Ken Griffey Jr., couldn't get him. Phillips tried to trade for Barry Larkin, couldn't get him. I don't care. I don't care about that. I don't care what he thinks. And Jim Duquette. Jim Duquette was the GM here for 9 minutes. Directly after Steve Phillips, he succeeded him. And his claim to fame is making one of the worst trades in Mets history, trading Scott Kazmir for Victor Zambrano. So I don't care what any of them think about the moves that David Stearns made. David Stearns is, to me, body of work wise, not just with the Mets. David Stearns, the executive over the course of his career, and not going all the way back. David Stearns as a GM / president of baseball operations at the big job. David Stearns has already had a better career than both of those guys. Probably both of them combined. Steve Phillips left here and was never a GM again. I did tweet earlier that Jim Duquette left here and was never a GM again. I guess he was the co-GM of the Baltimore Orioles. Okay. He was there for 3 seasons. They averaged like a 400 winning percentage while he was there. And then now he talks about being a GM. It's like, I don't care about any of these people. Like, I don't care about what they think. And I know that might seem harsh to some folks, but like, I just don't. Like, why am I going to listen to Jim Duquette? I wish I could get paid half the money that these guys made in their careers to be as bad as they're at their jobs as they were. So, no, I don't agree with Steve Phillips, but there's not many things I agree with Steve Phillips on, Darren. Guys, this has been a lot of fun. Weird show today because we had a lot to talk about, and Ibby was kind enough to bless us for a few moments with his presence to give some thoughts on Freddy Peralta. If you missed any of the show, you can go back and watch it on repeat. Walk off whiskey, it ends when the cup is empty. I've got a mug this week, not a rocks glass, so you can't see that it's empty, but I wouldn't be waving it over my computer if it wasn't empty. So it is empty. Got to get out of here. But I will say this. Big week for the Mets. Heavy lifting is probably done. Might be another move or two, small move before the season starts. We're looking at the team that is going to open up 2026 by and large right now, and I think it's a good team. I think this team is in a lot of ways better than they were anytime last year. Offensively, in certain ways, maybe they won't be, like they don't have the exact straight up power that they had before, but I don't know if it matters. Mets finished 5th in home runs last year. Where did it get them? Didn't matter, right? They had 224 home runs. They were 5th. Just ahead of them in 4th place, the Anaheim Angels. Where'd it get them? Nowhere. I'm not big on projections. They're close sometimes. They're way off other times. They're projected with Fangraphs and Zips and Steamer and all these things. Somewhere between, I saw 196 home runs on the low end, 206 on the higher end. So let's just say right in the middle, around 200, right? 200 home runs this past year would have put them in 10th place. That's enough. And when you factor in that they're going to have more competitive at bats by and large, they're going to have, batting averages and everything, but they're going to have higher batting averages for people who want that. They're going to put more balls in play. I don't think we're going to go a season with no comeback victories after 8 innings. I don't think we're going to be complaining week in and week out that the offense scored 10 runs and then didn't show up for 5 games, and then scored 15 runs and then didn't show up for 4 games. I don't think we're going to see that boom and bust. I think we're going to see sack flies. I think we're going to see hitting, not situational hitting like bunts and slap hits. I mean, situational hitting. Like driving a ball up the gap with 2nd and 3rd. Juan Soto gets on base. He walks. Maybe he steals 2nd with his newfound ability to steal bases. And Bo Bichette, base knock, drive him in. 1-0 Mets, 1st inning. That's what we're going to see. Stuff like that. So I think this team's going to be really good. I think this team's going to be exciting. Are there, flaws? Sure. Are there risks? Always. It's baseball, man. Yeah, Sal. We're not going to see 0-70 after 8 innings. What a joke. I agree with you, Carson. We're going to see dog. Got that dog in him. Winning baseball. Freddy Peralta, leader, bulldog. Marcus Semien, leader, bulldog. Bo Bichette, leader, bulldog. Polanco, leader, bulldog. See what I'm doing here? See the kind of people they're assembling? They built a team. This is no shade towards the guys. We all loved Pete Alonso. Brandon Nimmo, easiest guy in the world to root for. So, where did any of it get us? I said something to somebody on Twitter before, and I'll kind of sign off on it here. The Mets have made the playoffs back-to-back years 3 times in their 60-plus years of existence. It's not great. Since 2019, Pete Alonso's first year, Jeff McNeil's first full year, Brandon Nimmo entrenched as a guy who's a part of this team. 7 seasons. They won 2 playoff series. 7 seasons. 2019 fell apart. Didn't make the playoffs. 2020, shortened season, chaos. Something like 80% of the league made the playoffs. Couldn't make the playoffs. 2021 fell apart. Couldn't make the playoffs. 2022, great season. 100 wins. Atlanta comes up, catches them at the very end. I don't even fault the Mets for that. Atlanta was on another level. Mets were playing like 600 and something baseball winning percentage wise. Braves were playing 750 and just ran them down. I don't blame the Mets for not winning that division, but I blame them for getting punched in the face by Atlanta, getting snuck up on by Atlanta, and then folding against the Padres. They got punched and they could not get back up. 2023, disaster. Complete failure. No playoffs. 2024, I give them credit. They rallied. They fought. They built. They went on a hell of a run. They made the playoffs, of course. But let's not forget, first half of that season, how bad were they? How bad were they? Horrendous. Again, I give them credit. This is not about how you start. It's about how you finish sometimes, and they finish strong. But they still almost didn't make the playoffs. Again, I give them all the credit. 2024 was spectacular. They had dog that year. But how'd they follow it up? 2025 fell apart. Didn't make the playoffs. 0-70 when trailing after 8 innings. So I don't know about you guys, but I want to do something else. When you take all of those seasons from 2019 to now, and that's the result that you come up with, I just want to do something else. So yeah, I loved Pete Alonso. Probably my favorite player on the team. I don't really do favorite players. It's not like my bag, but I had a Pete Alonso jersey. So let's go with that, right? I love watching Pete Alonso. I said, even to this day, I think he'll be successful over that 5-year contract. If I were the Mets, I probably would have given him the 5-year deal he signed with Baltimore. But, what did it get us? It didn't get us anything. So this desire to change over the last 7 years, again, I'm not laying it all at Pete's doorstep. I'm not putting it all on him. It's not all his fault. But the bottom line, it was just never enough. No matter what happened, it was not enough. Great year from Pete Alonso, not enough. Down year from Pete Alonso, not enough. Best year of Brandon Nimmo's career, not enough. Worst year of Brandon Nimmo's career, because we've seen it all. 2 guys who were with the Mets their whole tenure, not enough. Jeff McNeil even, lesser player than the other 2, but fine. Best year of Jeff McNeil, we saw it. The Mets win? No. Worst year of Jeff McNeil? We saw it. We watched it. Did the Mets win? No. Hell, he had one absolutely electric year before he was here. True. But Edwin Diaz. The Mets arguably, us as Mets fans, arguably watched his best year and his worst year of his career. Best year, didn't matter, didn't win. Worst year, didn't matter, didn't win. So I'm tired. I'm tired of it. So when I tell people to put their personal emotions aside, I'm not saying it as some cold, unfeeling idiot. I know emotions are part of being a sports fan. I'm not telling you can't have them. I'm just saying, like, what else do you want? Don't you want to win? And ultimately, they just didn't win. It didn't matter what they did. So I want to just see something different, whether I like a player or not, whether I think a player is going to be good or not. I want to see something different. And I give Stearns credit for having the balls to go out there and give us something different that he believes in, knowing full well that he was going to take a hit. He was going to get obliterated for what he did. And he did. He got skewered for 2 months. Now look at him. David Stearns' revenge tour. Carson, emotions are 100% fine, but they're not a way to run a baseball team. I agree. Guys, went a little long today because we had Ibby jump in. Appreciate all of you. 350 or so is the high water mark. We're at 330 right now. Appreciate you guys for being here watching. We'll be back on Wednesday with Till Mets Do His Part, myself and Ibby, 5:30 p.m. Eastern. I'll be back the following Friday doing this show, Walk Off Whiskey, 7 p.m. Eastern, till the cup is empty. Subscribe to the channel, Till Mets Do His Part. Follow us across social media, Till Mets Do His Part. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on TikTok, we're on Blue Sky, we're on Substack. Head on over to Substack. Subscribe there. Free subscription still on Substack. We're trying to do some cool stuff when the season starts. Subscribe here on YouTube. If you missed any of the show, you can go back and watch us. You can watch it on replay on YouTube, on Twitter, on Substack. It stays on all those places forever and ever. And if you can't do any of that, I'll make sure to get this out as an audio podcast by tomorrow morning. It's a little hard on a Friday to get it out the same night. Got a lot of stuff going on, but make sure to get it out by tomorrow morning. Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I'm John Sapanaro. This is Till Mets Do Us Part. Walk Off Whiskey. We're all in one family, all doing what we do. Till next week, LGM.